Welcome to Stand Up for Doctors. I'm your host, Kim Downey. Thank you very much for joining us. I'd like to welcome Dr. Ryan McCarthy and Dr. Tom Wright. Thanks for joining us today, Ryan and Tom.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. So we met on LinkedIn and subsequently had terrific Zoom conversations. By way of introducing each of you, Dr. Ryan McCarthy is the Program Director, Internal Medicine Residency at Berkeley Medical Center, WVU School of Medicine. And my dad graduated from WVU, and I have relatives in West Virginia. So West Virginia has a special place in my heart. And I knew I loved talking with Ryan. And Ryan started the Healthcare as Human Narrative Medicine Project during the pandemic, which we'll talk more about. And Ryan's TEDx talk, Healthcare is Human, From Pandemic Pain, Stories of Beauty and Light, can also be found on the website, which I'll link in the show notes. Ryan published a great article recently on Kevin MD called When This Doctor Gets a 0-Star Rating, and the link to that will also be in the show notes. And I learned this fantastic acronym from Ryan for HOPE, helping other people every day. And I love that. And Dr. Tom Wright is a family medicine physician, personal and team coach. His website will be linked in the show notes, and a well-being advocate. And Tom's LinkedIn post content is terrific. And we have been communicating that way for a bit. So I was really looking forward to our conversation. And some of Tom's recent posts have covered topics including decision fatigue, why fairness is such an important thing for human beings, and overcoming perfectionism. And our conversation covered lots of ground, from us sharing some personal stories to vacation adventures, to me learning from Tom about the British term never events. And we had quite a good chat about blame, shame, and never events. So today we'll be talking about Ryan's Healthcare as Human Narrative Medicine Project, and potentially Tom's take on blame, shame, and never events, or anything else that evolves from our conversation, because Tom could talk about anything. So as we start, I'll ask you each what you'd most like our audience to know about you as we begin our conversation. Ryan, would you like to go first?
Sure, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today and that lovely introduction. I am an internal medicine doctor, and I think what's most unique about me is that I have a strange, wonderful, beautiful, and unique vantage point on my hometown. As a primary care doctor, I do an old-fashioned model of medicine where I see patients in my office and in the hospital. As we know, that is not what most doctors do, or very few of us still do it. And I've been doing it now for about 20 years in my hometown. And I find that it is a remarkable challenge, but really a wonderful way to serve my community. And I think that's probably the most unique thing about me as an internist.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And Tom, what would you most like our audience to know about you?
Well, first of all, I want to say thanks, Kim, and it's a real pleasure to be here. And it's great to meet you, Ryan. And I think I really resonate with Ryan's Healthcare is Human idea. And I think since I started on my own healthcare journey, I've always felt like potentially something was missing. And so something that I'm really passionate about aligns with that, in that, everything in life is about relationships. And sometimes we miss that because we focus on the professional side, which is incredibly important in healthcare. But how can we bring that humanity back into healthcare, like Ryan is talking about? So that's something I'm super passionate about.
Wow, excellent. Thank you. So this already brings some things to mind. So Ryan, one question I would like to ask you is, some people might be curious because other areas of the country, or even in West Virginia, well, we all use hospitalists. And so the doctors don't go into the hospital. So how are you still able to do that? Do you have hospitalists in that hospital, or?
Yeah, it's a great question. And at the beginning of my career, there were no hospitalists. So I got to see that world, and that definitely allowed me to pull all of my hair out back when I was no hospitalist. But now I work now at the Berkeley Medical Center, and we have hospitalist support. And their assistance in helping bring my patients into the hospital allows me to continue to do this. So, yep, I do have wonderful hospital colleagues that allow me to continue to do this. And I think to back up what Tom was saying about relationships and that piece that was missing, I hope we get into that, because that was a key part of what I think caused me to start Healthcare is Human. I had that sense as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe you can continue with that, because I fully agree that relationships in healthcare between the people working in healthcare, right, and the colleagues and doctors with each other and doctors and patients. So go ahead, Ryan, if you'd like to start.
Sure. And I think, I love the perspectives of internal medicine and family medicine. I think that we are, I'm biased, but I think those of us that are kind of general and have a larger view of the community, I think in many ways, I was always destined to have that. The other way I would describe myself is I describe myself as medically omnivorous. I'm interested in a little bit of everything. I'm an internist because I would have gotten totally bored doing one specific thing. And so I like the variety. And I think, like many professionals and doctors, my gaze for the longest time was on the person in front of me and that professional development that was mentioned in the professional side. And I didn't put that gaze and attention on myself and my relationship with my colleagues, with my patients, with the profession. And so, Tom, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that relationship piece, because I did not think about that for so long in my career.
Yeah, I love everything you've said, Ryan, and it's so interesting. I wonder if that's part of, how we're brought up through traditional westernized healthcare, that the emphasis is placed on, and I'm careful to say not in a wrong way, but the emphasis is solely placed sometimes on the other person and not on ourselves, and there are implications for that as providers. That we're seeing kind of record numbers of burnout and mental health issues and physical health issues for us as well as healthcare providers. So I completely agree, and re-establishing or reconnecting with yourself and understanding that relationship, having more self-awareness, having more self-compassion is crucial. I think for us to have any kind of longevity, in healthcare. So yeah, I really love what you said about relationships with ourselves, with other people, with society.
And Tom, just a spotlight, you did your training in the UK, is that correct?
Yep, I trained in Wales and then worked all over the UK and yeah, now I work in Canada in BC.
So what we can say is these issues are ubiquitous, whether you're in the UK, Canada, or West Virginia. And Ryan, I see that you're muted. If you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, and if you want to continue with what we were just talking about, or speak a little to your Healthcare is Human narrative medicine project, how you got started with that.
Yeah, Healthcare is Human. The pandemic 4 years ago, I was just like everybody, I was blindsided. And I had this sense, and maybe this is because I'm an Appalachian and I always feel that my patients who are rural, they are often neglected in media narratives. We are often considered backwards and out in the country. And for, just to be quite honest, I mean, my population is more old, less educated, poorer, often forgotten, resource poor, access challenges out the wazoo. And so when the pandemic started, I really felt like there was no authentic story emerging from Appalachia. And I just had this creative urge that I knew I would be an eyewitness. And that goes back to when I described seeing all parts of my community in the hospital and in the office. I knew that whatever happened, I would witness it and hear it. And I basically had a moment of inspiration at the beginning of the pandemic to call a photographer. And it's actually the woman who took this photograph in my office. I called Molly Humphreys, the photographer, and I said, hey, do you want to come take photographs of healthcare workers to document the pandemic? Amazingly, she said yes. And then that was the beginning of a process that we just snowballed from there. I talked to a friend of mine that was a radio producer, and she said, I can guide you in recording interviews. And then we very quickly had a two-prong storytelling project where it was photographs and first-person narratives. And the whole idea was just I would just kind of put a microphone in one of my colleagues' faces and say, hey, how's your day going? And just kind of start there. I wouldn't introduce them. I wouldn't, in the podcast, I wouldn't give them a job title. I would let them introduce themselves in any way that they wanted. And that wasn't intentional at the beginning, but I think it speaks to the idea that I really just wanted to honor people that were working around me, share their stories so that we could understand more. And so much of it has to do with connections and relationships that I knew were missing.
Yeah, well, that's beautiful and important. Tom, what does that bring up for you?
Oh, so much. I love that. I really want to appreciate, what you've done and what you've contributed there, Ryan. It's really wonderful. And it makes me think of, this idea in psychology of self-concept, self-schemas where we label ourselves. I say, I'm Tom, I'm English, I'm a doctor, I'm, whatever. And these labels are useful in the world that we exist in, and sometimes they create barriers. So I really like the way that you just let people be. You didn't label them. You just put the microphone there and said, hey, say whatever you want and whatever comes up for you. And I think in healthcare, we can become siloed. I'm an internist, you're a family medicine doc, or you're a nurse, or, you're a patient, I'm a provider. And sometimes that can create some barriers as well. So just letting those fall away and just recognizing our interconnectedness, our common humanity is so powerful. It's so transformational.
That's beautiful and so important. And that brings to mind what you're both talking about, labels. And some doctors have shared that for a while they thought, I'm just a doctor and all I can be is a doctor, and their label or identity is their everything. So Ryan, if you wish to speak to the fact that you did this narrative medicine project, you've done a TED Talk, you've written articles for Kevin MD. Did you ever feel like that, I'm just a doctor, or how did you branch out into all these different endeavors?
That's a great question. And I got to give a lot of credit to my children. They range in age from 20 to 14. And they've grown up in a house that my wife, Erica, and I have really fostered creativity and the performing arts. And my children really have helped remind me that long ago I discarded, if you will, I'm going to come back to that, but I discarded a lot of the creativity inside of me or put it to the back burner to learn internal medicine, to be a resident. And quite honestly, my children came early in my life as a doctor. And so a lot of my own personal artistic and creative parts of me that were there were really stuck in the background. And I think the confluence of the pandemic just made me really realize that I had to tap into those to care for myself, to understand what was going on around me, to process trauma, to deal with, just try to understand myself. Tom, I love that idea of self-concept. I really was asking like who am I now in middle age with these children and facing this, and how do I deal with a fractured healthcare system that makes it difficult for patients to get care? And for me, I was asking all of those questions, and Kim, those latent creativity experience, the creative part of me, I realized I had to tap into it. So some of those things were there. I've always loved writing and photography and art and theater. And I think I had just pushed that too far into the background to be a husband, father, and doctor.
Which a lot of people do. So I love that you gave yourself the time and space to tap into that creativity and realized how important that it's essential, right? So Tom, how about yourself as far as the labels and just being a doctor? Did you ever feel like that, or how did you branch out into coaching and such?
Did I ever feel like that with the labels? I think, yes, it's very easy to be pigeonholed, you know, in lots of different parts of society. I really resonate with what you're saying, Ryan, and I think that it's fascinating to me that especially when you become an adult, we throw away, or some people do, throw away this idea of creativity. But if you watch a group of preschoolers and you give them all, you know, a box of crayons, they'll all have creative, you know, imagination, whatever. It's amazing. And I don't think that goes away. It's just the context that we're in, you know, in healthcare, maybe we're not encouraged to be creative, but our best thinking comes from, you know, that space. And what I'm hearing you say as well is it was therapeutic for you in some sense. And I've certainly felt, you know, the fun of being more creative at times. I'll just speak a little bit to your other question, Kim, about the coaching. So I started my coaching journey probably about 3 or 4 years ago, and I trained with an organization in London, and now I'm completing a master's degree in positive psychology and coaching psychology. And very briefly, for people who haven't come across positive psychology, or I think it's quite a popular term these days, is really looking at the things that make us thrive and flourish, all the things that are right with us.
Oh, that's terrific. And David Fessel is a physician. If you're not connected, he shares daily positive psychology posts, and I love that. And I've collaborated with him before. And as far as the creativity, I've actually collaborated on a Kevin MD article with Dr. Charity Hicks and Dr. Amy Jo Farrow. She is in the UK, and Charity Hicks is in West Virginia. So a connection for each of you. And that should be published, I think, within a couple of weeks, speaking to the importance of, you know, creativity and, you know, in medicine and for doctors. And actually, May 30th is like World Creativity Day. So Ryan, were there other things that you wanted to talk about, maybe your TED Talk or related to the Healthcare as Human Narrative Medicine project?
Sure. And I think just to back up to, you know, Tom, what you were saying about that idea of, you know, the positive psychology about what is right with you. And I think that's critical. And I think the Healthcare is Human journey for me has helped me experience that in real time. And I know now that these creative endeavors, and this is part of the reason I want to encourage my colleagues and promote these within healthcare, is I love that these creative endeavors are often accessible, cheap, easy, reproducible, scalable, and you can take, you know, depending on what your creative urges are, once people in healthcare gain the recognition that this is important to me, it's not therapy, but it is absolutely therapeutic. And we go back to, I think it is, you know, like preschoolers and with the crayons. These narrative projects, they really help heal pieces of me that have been hurt by this system and this experience, and they bolster me in a way that now with medical students and residents that we're training, we're really trying to incorporate these into our curriculum in a way. And the way I see it is this continuum. I'm a part of a generation of doctors that were really raised here in West Virginia with the ethos that you have to physically care for yourself, that you have to exercise and sleep. And that was really ingrained into me early in my career. But some of these things that we're talking about were not on the map. And I think that's the next piece of evolution, at least in my neighborhood, for the whole concept of caring for us. And Tom, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm really impressed that was you know, how you were brought up and that there was that focus. I don't feel the same in the UK where I trained. I don't know if that's changing now, and I really love that you're also thinking, you know, systemically and how you can help medical students and future generations. I think that's so important for all of us. It doesn't matter what age you are. You don't need to be you know, a certain age to be thinking about a legacy that you can leave for future generations. I think we can all think about that. And, you know, just the wider ecology of the world. You know, when we're thinking about patients, when we're thinking about medical students and residents. So, yeah, just creating healthier systems, because certainly I think my experience has always been, yeah, very reactive, very pathology focused, very disease focused, but not really thinking about the front end. And that was another thing that just didn't really click for me.
Mm.
So yeah, I love what you're talking about, Ryan.
So Ryan, if you either wanted to add something to what Tom was saying or give some specific examples, as you're saying, creativity can be cheap and easy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to Tom, to jump on what you were saying about going from pathology focused to proactive and care and wellness and prevention. You know, what's interesting is that my journey in healthcare is human. I've become a writer as a result. And what's interesting is that I started by jotting down notes on my phone when I was eating my lunch in my car between my office and my hospital rounds. And I've told this story because it's totally true. At the end of a grocery list that I was reviewing one day in the pandemic, I wrote, "Today is horrible. I have no idea how I'm going to make it through this day." And then I started jotting these notes down. And so I encourage students and residents that I work with to whatever form or whatever, you know, I chose a phone. If somebody wants to use a notebook or a laptop or an iPad or something to jot down their thoughts in any kind of free form way, I didn't realize that I was journaling. I didn't realize that some of those were poems. I didn't realize that some of those were going to be the basis for other endeavors. And now, because this phone is with me all the time, I have all of these documents that I go back. And if something happens in healthcare and I get, you know, as writers say, if I get the feelies over something that has happened to me during the day, I know that I need to write about that. I need to just start getting something down. And it does a couple of things. It really helps me care for myself. It helps me deal with pain, trauma, frustration, anger. And so I often just kind of ask students like, okay, what time of day works for you? What type of technology? Or do you want to do analog or a pen or a paper? And then plugging people into what their natural inclination is. I think that's how somebody could grow those skills in their own life.
That's excellent. And if you know or don't know, as far as what I'm doing, I've shared that like I simultaneously know what I'm doing and I don't know what I'm doing. Like I don't really know what I'm building, right? Like I just do it. So as I'm trying to figure that out, I was speaking with Shuli Suman. She's an executive coach just yesterday. And she told me that one thing that she tells her clients is to just lay down on the floor or your bed with like a pad of paper and a pen, or it could be your phone, and just lay there and look at the ceiling for 15 minutes. And she said things will start, popping up. So yesterday we finally had, it was the warmest, sunniest day here in Connecticut yet this year. It got up to 73 degrees. And after I recorded an episode and spoke with her, I just sat out. We have a porch and I had a rocking chair and I did what she said. So I like closed my eyes. I felt the sun on my face. I had a pad of paper, and then I just started jotting some things down. So I love that, Ryan. What would you like to add, Tom?
No, I think that's wonderful, and just speaks to, you know, our individuality. You don't have to, if you're, when I'm speaking with coaching clients or anybody really, you might not be a writer. People might prefer this, you know, having a kind of group setting where they just have the opportunity to just say whatever comes to their mind and just let it out. That's totally fine. Some people are super arty. Some people love getting out in nature and going for a walk. Like whatever your creative outlet or pursuit, I think it's wonderful. I do the same thing, Ryan. I write things on my phone all the time, just these little random thoughts. It's very cathartic. And I think that, you know, we're very cognitive beings. We live up here. And just finding a way of getting those thoughts out is so powerful. And actually seeing it written out, oh my goodness, that's what I'm thinking. Interesting. And now I can make that connection with that. So yeah, I love that. And I think all of us should, if we can, try to find our own creative pursuit.
And one thing that brings to mind is my physician coach, Dr. Michael Hirsch, says brains are gonna brain, right? So sometimes just getting that stuff down is that you can look at yourself or what your thoughts a bit more objectively if you write them down.
And I think one comment I'd like to add, Tom, one of the things I think that you're speaking to that I've found real solace in, and I try to encourage my colleagues in, we all have routines and we can go through a boring routine, but if we do it intentionally, we can make a routine a ritual, and a ritual of stepping intentionally into making my lunch or cleaning the kitchen, or these simple, boring things that I neglected for so long. They often can be a space where, even if we're not ready to write something down or do something creative, we can give ourselves that time that, okay, I've stepped out of the exam room. I'm going to intentionally make a cup of coffee and I'm going to think about it, and I'm going to sit here and I'm going to look out, and we step away from that brain, right? And I have to do that. And you step into a different way of being, that emotional state. Oh, look, it's warm outside. There are birds. Kim, I love when you say that we step into our present reality in that emotive, intuitive way, and try to stop our brains from braining.
One of my best friends does that with brushing her teeth. She just says like she really, really enjoys brushing her teeth. And while she's brushing her teeth, she just thinks about and focuses and concentrates on brushing her teeth. And that's one of those, times where she's like really in the present moment. So I think that's terrific, Ryan. Thanks. Tom, did you want to add something to that, or did you want to bring up anything about because us here in America, or at least me, hadn't really heard about blame, shame, and never events.
I can talk about that. I will just say, I think also one thing that the three of us are alluding to is mindfulness. Tuning in to the moment, being intentional, being present, about what we're actually doing while we're doing it. And I know whenever we hear that, we're like, yeah, that sounds great. That sounds really simple. That sounds wonderful. But it's so powerful. And I'll just briefly say the reason why it's so powerful is because when we are mindful, when we tune into the moment, we're actually engaging a different part of our brain. We're engaging the prefrontal cortex. That's the mothership of our nervous system. That's the bit where we are creative, to your point, Ryan. That's where, all of our executive thinking comes from, and we can take a step back. So even though it sounds so simple, looking out the window, looking at the sunshine, smelling your coffee, brushing your teeth, and tuning in, it's really powerful. But it's just remembering to do it. I will talk about that term. So Kim and I were talking before, Ryan, about there is this term in the UK, a never event. And essentially it means something that I don't know who originally coined the term, but something that should never happen in healthcare. Some really painful, terrible things, pediatric deaths, things like that. The issue with the term is that these things do happen in healthcare across the world, and when they do, the shame and the blame that comes up that's associated with them, if you're someone who's involved in something like that, the ripples of pain that just come from that. And then, how can we as a community create different language, still support everybody who needs that support, but find a way that doesn't kind of create those barriers? Because, instantly you've got people saying, it was nothing to do with me. I'm not the one to blame. This is so-and-so's fault. So yeah, I don't know what kind of lands for you when I say that, but that was a conversation that Kim and I were having.
I can deeply resonate with a lot of that, and I do spend a lot of time thinking about never events in so many ways, because here in the American healthcare system, I experience a lot of those, and I have to ask myself, why they happen, and talk to families, from somebody who did not have any access to care, or did not have any ability to see a specialist or afford medication. I think I would kind of toss those into never events, that things I feel like we should not tolerate. And yes, I think the concept of blaming somebody else or something, or even turning internal blame, and then feelings of shame from whomever, we decide to blame. And that cycle, I think, is so common to us as human beings and as healthcare workers. And I've been a part of that. And really, if I can say this for a second, one thing that happened in the pandemic is it helped me realize that there's only so much that I can do as one person. And I had never really been confronted by that. And that has really helped me understand those never events when they happen, to not internalize the shame and the blame for that. And it's been very helpful, but it's really hard. Every time these happen, it's just morally devastating. And so it really causes me to ask more questions and have fewer answers.
And right. And things are going to happen, complications are going to occur, and you all need to give yourself some grace. And if you haven't seen the episode I recorded with Dr. Mark McLaughlin, the neurosurgeon, I hope that you'll watch it, because he talks about these things, and it's a very, very powerful episode. And you guys need to give and he says that you have to think that outcomes are just the outcomes, right? He's a neurosurgeon, and he used to think if he had a good outcome, it was luck, but then blame himself for the poor outcomes. And it was an editor of a book he was writing that said, well, that's an impossible way to live. So I wish we didn't have to wind down, because we could talk all day long, but as we are winding down, Tom, if you had anything either to add to that, or share any tips for your colleagues, or just anything else you wanted to share with our audience.
Yeah, I think I'll leave it with actually what Ryan was just saying about not internalizing things. That's something that I've learned as well. It's very hard to do in the moment, but we deal with so many other people's emotions. We deal with so many of our own emotions, and not turning it into something about us or a part of us, and realizing that, that Shakespeare quote, nothing is good or bad, only thinking makes it so, that things do happen in life, and it's actually our interpretation of the events. And realizing that if we're in line with our values and we're doing our best, we're really trying our best, working within a system that is overstretched and, understaffed, the rest of it, that actually we've done our best. So giving ourselves that self-compassion, this is something I talk about a lot, but self-compassion is really, really, really important. So I think I'm going to leave it there, and also just to say thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Well, thank you, Tom. And Ryan, do you have anything to either add to what Tom said, or any top tips for your colleagues, or anything else you wanted to share with our audience?
No, I think self-compassion is a great place to end. And I have only relatively recently in my career and my life come to understand it. And we in healthcare are usually so good to extend grace and understanding to the person and the family in front of us. And we need to give ourselves the same kind of grace and self-compassion, that we are just one person doing our best. And many of us are going to spend the rest of our lives trying to come to terms and understand and be okay that that is all that any one of us can do. And so I'm going to try for the rest of today to be a little bit better about that.
Excellent. And I actually just last Friday recorded an episode with Kevin MD with Dr. Tony Avellino, who's a pediatric neurosurgeon. And in our article, one of the things he says is, we need more love and compassion in medicine, including for ourselves. And that's exactly what you're speaking. We need it for each other too, right? and colleagues, and again, and patients and doctors together. So thank you both. This has been an excellent conversation. Tom, how can our listeners get in touch with you?
Probably the best way is on LinkedIn, Kim. So yeah, if you can share my LinkedIn, that would be great.
Okay. And Ryan, how about you? How can our listeners get in touch with you?
Healthcare is Human. That's the name of our podcast. You can find us on social media, Facebook and Instagram, Healthcare is Human. That'll get you all sorts of the goodies. And then from there, it'll link you to me.
Okay, well, that's all terrific. Well, thanks again for being my guest. I loved this conversation. I can't wait to publish it. Next week, I believe I will publish it. And you can find me on LinkedIn as well. And I'd love to hear from you. So please click like, share, and subscribe. I've got many more great guests to come. And in closing, to move the needle in healthcare, we all need to raise our voices and we all need to care about each other. We already know that doctors need to care about patients. Patients need to care about doctors too. So stand up, doctors, and let's stand up for doctors.
Thanks.